China is flexing its muscles as a global superpower, and not just where you might expect it. It's been spending billions of dollars transforming the infrastructure of an entire continent, building ever closer bonds.
Everybody in the equation wins. Zambia wins, China wins.
China has even placed its only overseas military base in Africa.
That gain in influence has alarmed China's rivals.
Our competitors clearly seek to convert soft and hard power investments into political influence, strategic access, and military advantage.
Just how worried should America and its allies be? In the 1960s, Zambians were celebrating independence from the British. It was a time of hope and freedom. To open up trade routes, they had to build a new railway line. It was a monumental infrastructure project, the Tazara Railway, and it was funded by China.
It was the most expensive infrastructure financing project that the Chinese had ever done. It was a boost for China's image and influence on the continent in the perception of developing countries and countries that were coming out of the colonial experience. China was seen as a partner to work with in instances where the West wasn't interested.
Tazara was only the beginning. By 2022, China had helped lay around 6,000 kilometers of railway lines across the continent, amongst thousands of other urgently needed infrastructure projects. It has built roads in Mozambique, hospitals in the Republic of Congo, a dam in Sudan. Since 2007, China has financed more African infrastructure than the next 8 overseas lenders combined. But all that investment comes at a price. Much of it is financed by loans. African nations' total borrowing from China since 2000 is almost $160 billion US. Angola, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Zambia, and Kenya account for half of that borrowing, though all but a few countries owe something to China, and much of it to state-owned Chinese banks. And there's more than one way to call in a debt.
Africa is a voting bloc of over 50 countries of the United Nations. That is a significant bloc, and the Chinese have exploited this. They've used this to their advantage as best as possible.
In recent years, African nations have regularly backed China en masse. In 2020, 53 countries issued a statement supporting China's crackdown in Hong Kong. Almost half of them were African. Some believe this diplomatic support is driven by the debt these countries owe China, and the supposed control this gives it.
They have lured African countries into what we call debt trap diplomacy. China has extended leases on critical infrastructure like ports and airports.
You have to imagine that if you were a Chinese rival and China was going around the world and getting significant boost to its influence by providing infrastructure, this narrative that China was actually trying to entrap its partners was a very, very attractive one.
It's a view fueled not by facts, but suspicion. The terms of many of China's loans to African nations are shrouded in secrecy.
China doesn't produce reports and documents on how much money is lending, where the money is going. That kind of transparency is not characteristic of the Chinese system.
In the rare cases where researchers have been able to uncover information, it's clear China plays hardball. All revenues from the Entebbe airport in Uganda, for example, are used to pay the Chinese lender who helped build it, before anyone else. Angola is repaying most of its loans by guaranteeing oil. In 2020, 61% of its oil exports went to China. Whilst China has never tried to use its loans to take control of the infrastructure it's built, it is strict about being repaid in full. Some Western institutions, by contrast, tend to be a little more accommodating. there are more conspicuous signs of China's growing power on the continent. In 2017, China established its first overseas military base, in Djibouti. Staffed by over 1,000 personnel, it looks like a direct counter to the presence of America and its allies just a few miles away. And it's looking to expand. US intelligence agencies believe China wants to build a new base on the other side of the continent, in Equatorial Guinea. China has been arming the continent too. From armoured personnel carriers in the Central African Republic to, it appears, drones in Ethiopia. China is selling military equipment to more sub-Saharan African countries than anyone else. China's presence in African civil society also continues to grow. And with that presence comes growing influence. 63% of Africans think that this is positive. In Ghana, less than half do.
My name is Bright Akwe and I'm an artist. And I'm basically having an exhibition on the streets of Accra. I put these posters up about a month ago.
In Ghana, there are claims that China's political influence keeps anti-Chinese news stories out of the spotlight. Bright makes satirical cartoons and displays them where everyone can see.
We selected this particular site because it's a very, very popular space. And so visibility is very, very high.
Bright's story starts in 2016. Back then, there was outrage in Ghana against Chinese migrants who were illegally mining gold, a practice known as galamsey. The mining has severely polluted water supplies, but the Ghanaian government was doing little to stop them.
Currently, look at where I'm standing. The land has been destroyed, Ayamaya, all in the name of gold.
As an artist, I thought, I could use my voice to speak to the issue.
He made this piece.
You see the Ghanaian delegation on their knees and the Chinese president pouring out some dirty water to them. I put this painting up on my social media channels and someone from the Chinese embassy saw it, and a press conference was held, and the Chinese diplomats in the press conference tried to impress on the Ghanaian government to literally check the media and check the artworks. They claimed was defaming their leaders.
It's not the only example of China exploiting its connections in an attempt to limit criticism. In 2018, a South African journalist had his column taken away after writing about China's treatment of the Uyghurs. A Chinese company had a 20% stake in the publisher he worked for. Its name? Independent Media.
The style of reporting has definitely changed. And a lot of these stories, I don't think they make it to the mass consciousness anymore.
Now, China is making bolder moves on the African media landscape.
Fellow Ghanaians, my name is Papa Star Times. Star Times, enjoy digital life.
Star Times, a Chinese digital TV operator, has an ambitious vision to give millions of Africans access to satellite television, distributing its hardware across the continent.
This deal has been one of the very, very controversial ones, especially regarding how much influence Star Times is going to have with regards to what is seen, what is not seen on our TVs, and how much that goes on to dictate how people largely see the Chinese here. I think it's an issue that borders on our democracy and perhaps even our security as a country.
In just over a decade, Star Times has become one of the leading digital TV operators on the continent, with 27 million online users. Its service carries hundreds of African channels, affording it increasing control of the digital airwaves. While Star Times develops Africa's broadcast infrastructure, another Chinese company is transforming its telecoms, although perhaps not its advertising.
Thanks.
The local people Would like to have the base station up and running before the range.
Seems like we've got a deadline and a challenge, but don't worry, we can do it.
Africans have largely welcomed Huawei and its development of the continent's 4G internet network.
As far as China is concerned, what we saw for mining companies, what we saw for construction companies, we're seeing the exact same thing now for tech. Financing undersea cables for digital infrastructure. Transsion has the largest share of any phone manufacturer in Africa. There's the fear that the Chinese might use their construction of the telecom systems to spy on African governments, and as an extension, spy on Western governments that are doing business with African governments. I think that concern is legitimate. But I think in a place where the options aren't as many or as price competitive, I think the Chinese will continue to play a very big role.
The seeds China planted in Africa decades ago have spread deep roots. Today, Chinese lending may be slowing, but its power and influence over society and politics on the continent will continue to grow. Western concerns are inevitable and understandable, but all too frequently, Western policymakers forget that African leaders and people aren't just bystanders.
This idea that Africans are sort of bamboozled and sort of tricked into accepting a deal that is actually not working for them infantilizes Africans, and somehow they need Westerners to come and defend them from the shifty and tricky Chinese.
Rather than worrying about what China is up to in Africa, perhaps Western governments should spend more of their time thinking about their own relationships on the vast and vital continent.
There has to be a reassessment of how the West sees Africa and Africa's place in the world. Because as far as the Chinese are concerned, they think Africa is going to play an important role in the world and they should be active in Africa. One hopes that the West can adopt the same attitude and not simply pay attention to Africa because it is a target of Chinese influence.
Hi, I'm Gotti Epstein, a journalist at The Economist. My colleague John McDermott and I recently wrote a special report on China in Africa. You can read that by clicking the link, and don't forget to subscribe.